Hi. I've been through a hell of a lot of therapy in the last 6 weeks, twice a week, intensive therapy, plus AA meetings every day, plus group therapy and Tuesday night, 2 hours. And I think I've worked out the reason that I had a mental breakdown. And I want to talk about it. And it's Mental Health Day while I'm recording this. So it seems like a good time. Before we get into it, I just want to say thank you so much for coming back every day and listening to my videos, and thank you for subscribing. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe. And if you like the video, don't forget to drop a like on there, because it really helps the channel and it really helps me reach more people. And people are struggling out there. I made a post today saying a World Mental Health Day post saying, just talk to someone if you're struggling. And I was inundated with messages and comments from people saying, I wish my daughter had talked to someone. I wish my father had talked to someone. I wish my son had talked to someone. They're no longer here. And it kind of blew me away. It really blew me away. It's an epidemic at this point, I feel like, unaliving. I feel like when I was a kid, I'd never even heard of this. And now it seems like everyone has been touched by an unaliving. I have to say that because you can't say the other word on social media. It seems like everyone's life has been touched by it in some way. And I've had to talk about my own attempt endlessly for the last 6 weeks in meetings and in therapy and to psychiatrists, and I've really tried to sort of really dig into, what caused me to get to the point where so many thousands of others get to, where it's just hopeless. This feeling of just dark hopelessness every day. It's incredibly frightening. And you feel like it's relentless. It's relentless, like a juggernaut of relentless darkness. That's all I can say. And that's how I feel like people get to when they get to that point. You can't see a way out, and you can't see it ever changing because it never has changed. But now when I look back, I see that it has changed for me in the past, but at the time I couldn't see that. And it is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I just couldn't look back at other times in my life when I come out of this depression. At that point, I'd become so absorbed with it. And also I was kind of completely in my own head thinking about myself. I wasn't being of service. I wasn't helping other people. I wasn't being useful to my family. I wasn't reaching out to AA. I wasn't sponsoring guys through helping other guys get sober. So I was completely in self. And whenever I'm obsessed with myself, whenever I'm thinking about myself, it's a recipe for depression. Every single time. If I'm thinking about myself, I'm going to be depressed. It's just how it goes with me. And I think you may be the same. I think there's an epidemic of depression now because in the older times, the society was fighting through wartime, or people were hungry and they couldn't have as much time to reflect. Nowadays, everyone's pretty much comfortable, and we're all pretty much, people are struggling, but they're not on the level that it was in previous generations. Like, everyone basically isn't starving to death, and there isn't. We just live in a much more comfortable world these days. Every generation gets more closeted in technology, and I feel like technology also can isolate, and it's isolated me, but I was isolated before. So isolation was another problem. So I was thinking about myself. I was completely isolated. I was at home, but I was just in my own head the whole time. And I should have been, if I'd have been present with the kids and present with Laura, I wouldn't have got to this point. So those were two big things. Did I finish the point about we're more comfortable now? Yeah, I'm just trying to say that I feel like as a generation, we've got more time to think about ourselves now than we ever did in the past. I mean, there's just less things to think about that are genuine dangers. So I feel like our minds will make something up. If there's nothing to worry about, my brain will think of something and make something up. It's just my nature. And I wonder if you're like that. Let me know in the comments if you're similar to that. So those two things. The third thing, which is what I made the video about today, was, and this is a huge one, not telling anyone how I was feeling. I think that was probably the biggest factor in what happened, is not speaking up, not telling anyone. I didn't tell Laura until that Sunday when it happened. And if I hadn't have told her, she's the reason that I'm still here, having told her what I was planning. If I hadn't told her, she wouldn't have called the police. I wouldn't have been intercepted, and I probably wouldn't be here now. So I've got her to thank for that. And it's just embarrassing, isn't it? I mean, it's funny to think that embarrassment can kill you. It's so weird to think that literally being embarrassed can be fatal. Because it's embarrassing to pick up a phone and talk to the sponsor and say, I'm not doing well. It's like a £10,000 phone. It's so heavy. I can't pick it up. I can't tell anyone, It's embarrassing. I've got shame around it. I got shame for people being like, well, you've got, not that anyone would, but in my head, I'm like, people will say, what have you got to be depressed about? You stop moaning. No one did say that, except a couple of people online. But no one in my circle said that. But in my head, I was like, that's what they're going to say. And that kept me in shame and kept me in fear. And I couldn't talk about it. So further isolation. And for an addict, my addiction wants me alone, and then it wants to kill me. That's what they say about addiction, and that is 100% what happened to me. So I was alone. The addiction wasn't being taken care of on a daily basis. I wasn't going to meetings. I didn't call my sponsor. That's already a recipe for trouble there, right there. So I was in a very dark place, and I've been in a dark place for 2 or 3 weeks, and I had got on antidepressants. And that's a whole other story. I was so anti-antidepressants, if that makes sense. I was staunchly against them, but it was so bad that I was just, I'll do anything. It was the gift of desperation. I was like, I'll do anything to come out, to be taken out of this feeling. So I'd started them, and I know in my right mind they takes 4 to 6 weeks to work. I know that, but they weren't working quick enough for me, and so I stopped taking it so seriously. I was like, well, I should take them every day, but right up until the unaliving attempt happened, I was sort of taking my foot off that a little bit, to the point where for 3 days before it happened, I wasn't taking them, which apparently, speaking to my doctor, is hugely dangerous and results in unaliving. I had no idea. Crazy to think that an antidepressant can make you off yourself if you stop taking it, but that was the perfect storm. All those 4 things were the perfect storm, and I've been through a lot of talk therapy, and I've talked about it a lot in meetings, and I've talked to a lot of guys, and I really think that those 4 things, as well as I made the series about why we separated. I don't want to blame the unaliving attempt on the separation, because it's all me. The unaliving's got nothing to do with Laura. It's 100% to do with me. I was responsible 100% for it. So I don't want to even bring the separation into it. But of course, that was a factor, that my life fell apart then. But I could have coped with that without wanting to unalive myself if those other 4 things hadn't slipped, I think. So it's apt. World Mental Health Day. I know it's when you see this, it'll be a couple of days after, but I realized I should talk about what I've learned in the past 6 or 7 weeks. There's been a lot of talk therapy, and I can tell you that it definitely gets better. I don't skip down the road every day, but if I look at a graph, every day is every day is up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. But if I look at a graph, it's going up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, but it's going up. Does that make sense? So it does get better. I'm just stretching. It does get better. And it is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. So if you're struggling, please talk to someone. Please don't stop taking antidepressants if you're taking them. Try not to isolate, and I know it's really hard. When you're depressed, contrary action is the hardest thing. The last thing you want to do is exercise, but exercise makes you feel better. The last thing you want to do is talk to someone. The last thing I wanted to do is talk to someone, but that's where the solution is. And I feel like it's coming back to that same thing. My addiction wants me alone, and then it wants to kill me. So it wants me isolated, and it wants to tell me not to exercise, not to reach out. It's brutal. It's brutal. But the good news is, if you're struggling, if you tell someone, they'll help you. I know they will. I mean, you have to speak up. And as guys, we find it hard as well. But it's not just a guy thing. It's everyone. It's a human thing. But the amount of messages I got today from people whose family members had done it, I had no idea it was such an epidemic. So we've got to keep talking, and we've got to try to help each other. So, yeah. I feel relief nowadays. I don't feel in that dark, relentless place anymore. And I just want to let you know that it can get better. And I love you guys. And let's come back tomorrow and we talk about something else.